The agenda tonight is a few announcements. One is the City of Norwalk has been in the process of updating the zoning regulations for the entire city, I think for the past 2 years now. And they are at the point where they are ready to make a draft presentation of their recommendations after having worked with the consultant for some time, and also stakeholder meetings that I think took place in 2021. Seems like a lifetime ago, but that presentation will be April 4th at 6 p.m. It's virtual, and it is one of the items that was in the ENNA weekly email blast this weekend. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these items, only because they are in the email. And if you need more information, you can write into the folks at City Hall as well, or email it to us. And then also in that email was a little forum that's being held on stormwater runoff pollution and stormwater management. That's being held at the Norwalk Public Library on March 29th. It is in person, and I believe they require pre-registration for that event. So you'll want to go online and take a look at that, and email into the library folks and register for that if you're interested in it. For a lot of folks, this is a new topic, but it's relevant right now due to the discussions you've heard us have about stormwater runoff at the Cemetery Street parcel. So if that has piqued your interest in stormwater runoff in general, then we suggest you attend this this forum. And then another announcement too is upcoming is what would normally be the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association annual community shredding day. We normally do that near the end of April after tax season, and in conjunction with Earth Day and Earth Day week. Right now, we're in the process of getting some new quotes from other vendors, and we hope to have that together tomorrow. And we'd really like to run this event, but I just want to remind everyone that we do need volunteers to help. And I think the last couple of years, it was hard to get folks to commit to showing up, but we do need 6 people in total. It's on a Saturday morning. We hold it at the East Norwalk Library, and generally from 9 to 12, but we'll get some more information out on that. If we can't get any quotes in that are reasonable and enough volunteers, then we'll go ahead and skip it this season, and hopefully be able to bring it back next year. The under current business, of course, is the Cemetery Mill Pond development application that comes up for public hearing continuance again this Wednesday, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, what we expect that to be. And then under new business, I'm just going to touch on this tonight. This was also in the ENNA email blast this weekend, is a new application under the TOD and EVTZ zone, another special permit. This one is for 49 Van Zant. Coincidentally right next to the East Norwalk Library, and it's for a 13-unit mixed-use residential apartment complex. And just want to mention briefly, at our April 17th meeting, we'll have guest speakers from a group who are coordinating a grant that was made to the Maritime Aquarium to study the shoreline and tidal marsh area at the southern part of Veterans Memorial Park. And they'll be making a presentation to us about what that grant is all about. East Norwalk Neighborhood Association is listed as a stakeholder, and therefore we'll be collaborating with this group to be able to coordinate getting feedback from East Norwalk residents on this study and what the potential options are for restoration of the southern part of the park. And I know they're using a term called naturalized shoreline in terms of protecting the park and dealing with climate change related issues over there. And that'll be for our April 17th meeting. And I think it's also a possibility, depending on the feedback on the 49 Van Zant permit, that we may also ask the applicants and their attorney to also come to the April 17th meeting and maybe provide a more comprehensive review of that proposal. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I know most of you folks were involved in the public hearings on March 2nd and 15th. We've also posted the complete videos of those. And for the March 15th meeting, ENNA posted this weekend also the written minutes of those meetings as well, so you can review those. But we wanted to let you know, in case you missed it at the end of the last meeting, which ran late as well, that the public hearing is being continued to this Wednesday night, March 22nd at 6 p.m. And the continuance is for the applicants to have their rebuttal, as we call it, to the public comments and answer any questions. And they'll also have a dialogue with the Planning and Zoning Commission and answer their questions as well. The agenda that they put out does include an action item following that presentation and their dialogue with the commission. And so we expect, not that we expect, but it is possible that the commission can take action on the item. And all that means is they can literally vote on it. And a lot of how that's going to go, it depends on what resolutions the staff prepares ahead of time to present to the commissioners. It could be a resolution to deny, a resolution to deny without prejudice, meaning the applicants can come back without having to start the process all over again, and for all intent and purposes, put a new plan before the commission. Hopefully there would be something that's more amenable to the community. Or it could just be a straight up approval and have probably a whole bunch of conditions applied to it. The legal notice that was published and the agenda both say that people who are interested can speak at the public hearing. And so that was a little confusing because they technically had closed the public comment portion of that hearing last week. And so we got an answer from Steve Kleppen today saying definitively that the continuance is only for the applicant's rebuttal. So anyone who didn't have an opportunity to speak last week will not be allowed to speak. Although, just a little caveat there, it's typical, or not typical, but it's in the past, if there has been new information that's been provided from the time of the last hearing last Wednesday to this Wednesday, then generally the chairman will allow the public to speak again, but only to those specific items. And the reason why I bring that up is because listed down here, there are several new items that came in since the March 15th hearing. One you would have seen in the ENNA email this weekend. It was an email from the Department of Transportation to the applicant's traffic engineer, stating they have no objection essentially to the changes at Route 136 at Cemetery and Gregory. They do make reference to needing some more specific information about one of the angles that's in that document, and that they'll be doing a further review when they get a new permit. So that is new information. The email header was not provided to ENNA, so we don't know when that email went to the applicants, nor do we know who was on copy of that. But we have requested that information just so we can get a sense of when and who knew what and when. Another new document that was posted apparently on Friday is the applicant's civil engineers, Redness and Mead. They apparently provided a response to the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, addressing the concerns that DEEP expressed earlier in the fall. And the response from Redness and Mead is dated November 22nd. But it was just posted on March 17th, just on Friday. So we've asked for an explanation of that, but clearly this is new information that ENNA did not have the benefit of having last week, nor did the public. And still missing information, but we've requested it, is we'd like to see the actual resolution to approve that's being put before the commission on Wednesday, and the list of the recommended conditions that are being suggested for this parcel. I mean, at this point, we still have to go on the premise that staff is and the commission is, they're both looking to have a resolution to approve. And there's really nothing at this point that leads us to think otherwise. It could actually be a resolution to deny without prejudice. But regardless, we would actually like to see that resolution beforehand. And especially the recommended conditions that could be a part of it. It would be new information, and it may possibly be something that we could speak to if it's likely that it's going to be approved and we think that the conditions aren't relevant enough in terms of addressing some of the more serious quality of life impact issues that we have. Okay, I thought this was a little interesting map here. We, one of our board members, Sarah Hunter, had put together a little Google pinpoint map of the petition signatures that came in. And just wanted to highlight, and this was, I think, only when we were at like 620 actual signatures. We're approaching 750 right now. But you can see that there's a large cluster, obviously, you know, in the whole East Norwalk area. But we also wanted to note that folks who live in other areas of the city, Rowayton and South Norwalk and West Norwalk, and up in the Silver Mine and Cranberry areas also signed the petition urging the commission to reconsider this application. There were a couple of outliers too, in terms of, I think Trumbull and Monroe maybe, but I think those folks actually work in East Norwalk, but we're not residents, so we didn't include them in there. And the petition is approaching 750 signatures, I think. And we're keeping that open as well. And I'll explain that in a minute. Actually, I'll just explain that now. Because the DOT apparently needs to take a closer look at a final permit application regarding the change of Cemetery Street and Gregory Boulevard, it may be beneficial for ENNA to go ahead and create another petition. Actually, another two petitions. One to the DOT, urging them to reconsider their preliminary approval of this, and another petition possibly to the DEEP, urging them to take a second look at the environmental impacts of this project. Okay, I'm going to go. Let me just stay on Cemetery Street for a minute. And Marianne, does anybody have their hand raised?
Yes.
Right now that has. Okay.
Judy has her hand raised.
Okay. And Judy, if that's in regards to Cemetery Street, that'd be great.
Okay.
I think you're on mute.
Judy, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I thought I did. All right. It's really just a question of timing. With the zoning code, I listened to all those things today, and you know they're trying to do, I think, the form-based zoning code, which covers a lot of topics that are involved in this project, our project, and I wonder if they're trying to get this project in before the new zoning is coming out, because there are recommendations in the new zoning that would limit this project in some way. Do we have any insight? I noticed Scott Goodwin was in some of these videos, but does anybody else have any insight into what they're actually proposing? I just don't know. I'm just raising it as a question. All right. That
Yeah.
was it.
I haven't. Yeah, no, it's a good question, and the reason why it's particularly relevant is we thought there's been a number of instances now where the city is pushing ahead with revising specific zones, TOD in particular, and EVTZ, but other areas as well, in the absence of doing this complete zoning regulation rewrite, which will impact not only the process, but some of the, how zones are managed all together. So you're right, Judy. And we actually, ENNA had repeatedly asked that new zoning not be considered until the zoning regulation rewrite was substantially complete.
Mhm.
So your question is valid. I haven't seen any kind of a draft of it, and I think what we noted in our email as well that Steve Kleppen doesn't intend to share the information prior to their draft presentation, so that we have some time to read it and digest it and really come up with some relevant questions and comments and suggestions. And so we don't expect to be able to see it until they present it on the, I think that's the one on the 4th.
It is. Well, would it be awful for me to send Steve an email saying I watched the charrette or whatever those are called, and that saw it was raised? Would any part of this project violate any of the upcoming zoning codes or require, any kind of further work?
Yeah, no, I think actually, I would say it'd be great if you could actually do that.
All right, I will.
And we'd be eager to see what the response is.
All right. Well, I've been sending Steve a lot of missives lately, so I'll do that one too.
I see. Thank you.
All right.
And Diane, also, Lisa Roger noted in chat that Wednesday's meeting is going to be in the community room at City Hall.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that. Yeah, there was a conflict with the Common Council chambers for another important public hearing. And unfortunately, it's the type of public hearing that maybe a whole bunch of folks would want to be at that one too. And it's unfortunate we can't clone ourselves, but apparently they were waiting just to confirm that they would have the technology available for the community room. And thank you for that. Yeah, so the public hearing for Cemetery Street will be in the big community room on the 1st floor at 6:00 and via Zoom, I presume. So we can come back to Cemetery Street. I just wanted to see if there was anything quick that somebody needed addressed right there. But the other item I wanted to talk about tonight is the is Van Zant. And so I think folks will recall that one of the concerns we had through the whole development of the TOD zone and EVTZ, the actual corridor on East Avenue, was a proliferation of larger scale mixed use buildings. And especially we had some concerns where the final mapping, despite our requests otherwise, included going into some of the side streets, Fort Point, into Rowan Street and into Van Zant Street. And we had preferred that the type of density and scale that they were talking about would have been better suited just to be on the East Avenue corridor itself, and possibly being on East Avenue and maybe going back in a block if it was the type of development that would warrant that. But unfortunately, the final zone was not written that way. So now we have, on the heels of the Cemetery Street project, which hasn't even been voted on, we have the second official EVTZ zone application, albeit significantly smaller. This is a 1/4 acre, 0.26 acres on Van Zant next to the library. And I provided the link to this application in this weekend's email. And what I can do also tonight, if we have time, if people are interested, I can also share my screen to show folks where to go on their own to see all of these applications throughout the city. that come through zoning, and to be able to open up all the documents themselves and kind of follow the timelines on them as well. But I don't show you anything that's not available on the city's planning and zoning website. So it's readily available. So right now that parcel as it exists is a structure that's a 2-family house. The proposed mixed use would have a total of 13 residential units and some commercial on the ground floor. That's not really identified what that would be as either retail and or office, but we can take a closer look at the specs as well. And it's 13 units with a mixture of the bedroom size and a total of 17 parking spaces. And this is kind of where it gives us concern again with parking. If you're familiar with Van Zant and the proximity of both the library and our firehouse, there's not a whole lot of parking there, and on-street parking would be challenging. So this would be one of the concerns that we could have with this development. In order to qualify for the 13 units, and I apologize, I'm not sure what's allowed by right there right now. It may just be the 2 units. I'm not sure why that's not in the attorney's proposal here, but I will look that up. But in any event, in order to qualify for the increased density up to the 13 units, they have suggested another a la carte mix of the public amenity bonus points. And they outline those in their drawings as well. But just to give you kind of a flavor, it's some of the same things you saw on Cemetery Street, like shared public seating, expanded sidewalks. These seem a little bit wider, possibly. Free Wi-Fi, a water bottle filling station, public art, rain garden, pollinator garden, an EV charging station or stations, bike racks, green roof, which we still have to clarify with staff as the relevance of having green roof as counted as open space, and then other amenities, which they do have in their attachments. I wanted to bring this up because this is a pretty typical chart that you'll see with architectural plans, especially going forward now with the EVTZ zone, where they'll actually review the number of units that they're going to have and break those out into the number of bedrooms that are proposed. They'll identify the floor area, parking area, and the coverage percentage of the lot. But then now new with EVTZ is they'll actually list the compilation of the bonus amenity points and break them out between which points are sustainable and the points that fall into the other categories. And just to refresh your memory, the compilation of sustainable type amenity points are the ones that are critical in terms of maximizing the height and the density. The application, I'm not going to go through these. I just want to remind you that because it is a special permit, it'll follow the same type of process that Cemetery Street did. And so it will require a public hearing, and it will also require that the commission do a review of the 13 special permit standards and possible conditions that they would set to mitigate any negative impact. And I don't think I have it on here. The other thing that they'll do is they will review and assess the value of the public amenity bonus points that are being offered by the developer as they relate to the impact on the community from the density and the height with that particular drawing. And again, I think that Attorney Suchi, Liz Suchi, is representing this application. And I don't want to speak for her, but I would have a sense that she wouldn't have any issue in being able to, now that the application is filed, to be able to come before ENNA next month with the applicants and make a presentation if people are so inclined. If you do go on to the city website and you take a look at the application, you'll be able to see what ENNA often references as applications that are in development months and months before the public actually gets to see them. So when you look at this application online, you'll be able to see some of the documents that suggest, these things get worked on for quite a while behind the scenes in planning and zoning before we actually see them. And there is as you can imagine, there is an intent that by the time it actually becomes an application and would be ready to go before the Planning and Zoning Commission, that it's considered a complete application by planning and zoning staff, and that they've already done a review to confirm that it meets the technical requirements of the zone itself. Okay, so just wanted to be able to open it up to questions and comments, concerns, also any new information. I see there's stuff in chat going on, so I don't know if Mary Ann can still hang on there and let me know if there's anything in chat or if anyone has their hand raised regarding cemetery, Van Zant, anything else going on in East Norwalk, DOT projects. I don't have a lot to share regarding, actually I have nothing to share at this point regarding the possible diverging diamond interchange at the exit 16 interchange. It's another one of these cases where getting some definitive answers out of city staff and out of the DOT has been challenging, to say the least. So we'll continue working on that.
Diane, there's within chat, Judy had commented that Waypoint parking today versus what's proposed, that there are 300 plus apartments with over 500 parking spaces allocated for residents and reserved parking plus 2 floors of parking for public for the retail shops. And then Roberta noted that there's overflow. This is regarding parking. From Fort Point, there's a plumbing company that already has insufficient parking and they often park on the street. And I know even with Van Zant, right nearby there, the shoemaker, there's really limited parking in front of his store as well.
Great.
I would say, yeah, I just want to interject a second, Mary Ann. I would say there's like 0 parking, like limited. That's being very kind.
I mean, every time I go there, I find one eventually, and sometimes have to walk a bit, but
he has no dedicated parking for his place, so you're jockeying for the 3 spaces that are available for the hair cutter. I think there's a dog place and Rosie's sewing place. Yeah. Right. There's like 3 or 4 spots like right there.
Yeah.
And Sweet Ashley's is right there too.
Yeah, I'm sure I went last week and the week before and didn't have any problem, but I'm sure if it was the summer, that would be a different story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do want to point out, I'll speak to Waypoint, but I also wanted to point out that we're going to take a look because we saw the reports on social media that the spaces that had always been free parking next to the Station House restaurant at the train station lot on East Avenue, suddenly they have parking signs or paid parking signs there. And so I took a drive by because people said not only are the signs posted now where you have to pay in those, it's just a little strip of spaces right next to the restaurant, but that the signs were so particularly high that you wouldn't even notice them. And I can confirm that actually. I drove by there yesterday and the signage is, would be way above my head for sure. I wouldn't even notice the parking there. And I'm not sure why that ended up as paid parking. I thought there was an agreement all along that the restaurant there would be able to preserve some spaces that were dedicated to them, with not being paid. So I'm going to speak with the owner and then see if I can get some information out of the parking authority, because nothing will kill business faster than having the parking authority, even more in East Norwalk at this point. So the other thing with, I wanted to just say something else on parking on Fort Point. I'm sorry, I lost my thought there, but, oh no, and on Waypoint too, Judy, to your question. So Waypoint was under redevelopment. It was under a special zone, and it had different zoning requirements in terms of what the parking requirement is. And over the years, the city, not unlike the rest of the country, actually, has really taken a stance to try to dramatically reduce parking requirements in an effort to influence, kind of public behavior in terms of driving cars. So, and so the parking requirement then was significantly different than what it is now. And I also think that the public parking, that actually, I think that got changed kind of midway through in terms of what would be reserved for the public. So it's really hard to compare apples to apples with that. As each of these zones go in, it is something that we have to consider. But parking has gone from 2.0 to 1 point something down to 1.3 per unit, and then I think down to 1.0 over here. The other question that goes into that is parking being done based on a residential unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms that are in the unit as well. So there's some legitimate questions on that. And, hopefully that will come up in the regulations.
Diane, there's one other comment. Lisa Roger noted that, is there a need or desire to have the public present at the 322 meeting, as we did in the first two public hearings, given that we can't speak?
Great question. And I would suggest that it's important for the commission to know that folks are interested in watching. It would be nice to have people show up at City Hall again, but we realize that people have lives, and these meetings can go on quite late, although it's my understanding that they intend to take up Cemetery Street first. And then if they need to, they can hold off on the other agenda items if it gets to be too late. So my preference would be if you're able to and have an interest, then to show up at City Hall, and you could actually watch the balance of the process of this with a rebuttal and the deliberation of the commissioners, especially if they're going to vote. And of course, the other option is to, watch it on Zoom live. And then if neither of those are possible, or you don't have a desire to do that, we will post the Zoom videos that the city provides through YouTube, and you can watch it at your leisure. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and then Judy, you have your hand raised, but I think everything's been answered regarding parking, or is there another question?
I have to go back. I was just gonna, everything's been answered with respect to parking, but it's interesting. Waypoint is building another phase where the Lomans was, and they erected a parking garage already, which goes back to my fear that that this building is going to go up, and then we're going to have a parking garage built, somewhere close by.
In reference to East Norwalk, you're saying, Judy?
Yes, with reference to the Cemetery Street project.
Yeah, and I think, and I believe actually I posted that, because even early on in the TOD study and the development of the whole plan, there right from day one, there was talk of the need and the desire for having centralized parking in East Norwalk, either on, I think actually even at one point Fitch Street was mentioned, to have a public garage there. And so that would then address the reduction in the on-site parking for the residential and the commercial businesses that this would generate. So we haven't heard anything definitive. And I think the way that I put it there was, I don't think personally, and having been doing this for years and years, I really wouldn't want anyone in ENNA to be surprised if you saw something come forward that suggested a garage.
All right, because I know we live, I mean, it's urban environments that are going for this, for where they're creating, these types of projects. But we, as somebody pointed out, we are suburban, and creating urban in the middle of suburban.
Yeah, and that's why, I've said in the past, like East Norwalk is kind of blessed and cursed to have our commuter rail station here, because we are subject to this whole concept of transit-oriented development. But one of the things that I think that ENNA really should push for is more the inequity of how these things are happening even within the city. For example, I don't want to diss our good friends over in Rowayton. And certainly one of the planning and zoning commissioners is not only lives in Rowayton, but she's a commissioner for the district there. We often suggest if this isn't the type of plan that you would put in Rowayton, based on the fact that they have a commuter rail station, then you shouldn't be doing it here. And the comparison of East Norwalk to East Norwalkers is that we're more like Rowayton and Old Greenwich than we are South Norwalk, in terms of being a neighborhood and not being, certainly not being a downtown or even relevant to the real downtown, to west to Wall Street.
Well, not to take up too much time, but at the, I forget what it's called. I want to call it the croquette. The video I watched, there was somebody from Rowayton there who was complaining bitterly about the changes that have happened in Rowayton with respect to the big walls building. And there was supposed to be some sort of walk along the river that is not taking place. And
Right, exactly.
They're really angry about how the community has, the whole flavor of the community has changed because they're putting up these big buildings.
Yeah, and you can imagine what the pushback would be there, if there was a suggestion, something to, similar to what's going on in East Norwalk, at the Rowayton train station, especially given the amount of commuters that go in and out of that station. But okay, what else does anyone have? There's a few other things.
Diane?
Yeah.
Yep, Ben has his hand raised.
Hey, Ben. You can.
Hey, everybody. I just had a quick comment about the parking, and then I wanted to talk about what you were just mentioning with Rowayton. I know parking is like contentious, and with Cemetery Street and with Van Zant, people are concerned about not enough parking, but people also aren't excited about the idea of a parking garage, which would provide extra parking. I personally would not want to see a parking garage in East Norwalk, but I also don't see as much the issue with scarce parking as everyone else in this call. So I'm just kind of wondering how those two things are squared. And then the other thing I was going to say is looking at Rowayton. I think that's a good point. I think neighbors in Rowayton would also push back quite a bit on any development around their train station. I personally think that any train station that we have should have dense housing built around it. But it is kind of unfortunate, looking at the street network in Rowayton, it just isn't built to support that kind of development. And I think East Norwalk is a lot more suitable to that kind of development than Rowayton is. And in that sense, I'd say East Norwalk is more similar to South Norwalk than it is to Rowayton. if anything, like this sounds like hyperbole, but like I almost think of Row 8 and Street Network as like too far gone. Like it's so low density. The connectivity is so bad. There's no commercial development in that area whatsoever. I like don't even see the point of having the train station in the first place. It just like slows down the trains. So if I was in charge of Metro North, I would ask like why do we even have this? But I think that East Norwalk is a little bit closer to South Norwalk in that way, because we do have commercial development. We do have like a reasonably well-connected street grid that can support the kind of like evolution in our development in a way that Row 8 just can't.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate those comments. And I would say, I think the first pushback on our comments regarding TOD principles not being applied in Row 8 and also had to do with the fact that the parcels themselves didn't lend themselves to, high density and height in terms of the actual apartments. And, what we had suggested is that it's in the same way that's likely to happen in East Norwalk and does happen around other TOD developments, and is about to happen in Westport big time, is the fact that developers can assemble parcels. And so once you have a number of parcels that are assembled, then you can certainly achieve the density and height. So I do think it is a good question, though, for the city to address in terms of equity between the two, because the fundamental tenets of TOD apply to, neighborhoods that have train stations. And, I wanted to mention something too, because it came up at the public hearing the other night, and I'm not sure if the gal is on here tonight because I could never see all the names at once, but someone was saying that they were a recent transplant to East Norwalk, and that they lived over on, it was either Raymond or Myrtle, one of the two, but very close to the station. And that they, even though that was the case, the gal had mentioned that her husband for some time had been on a waiting list for parking permit at the station.
I also heard that, and I thought it was
interesting. And I thought, I said, I'm going to ask Ben about this when I get a minute, which I never have a minute, but I wanted to. So did you hear that comment as well?
Yeah, I definitely did, and I also thought it was curious. I like, the whole hearing, I was like looking at where people were living as they were saying their addresses, just because I was curious. Right. And I mapped it out, and it's like 0.4 miles from like the furthest east point of Raymond Terrace to the station, and that's like less than a 10-minute walk. So I was like, what, why bother driving, like right, I think all of us in this call have a shared hatred of driving on East Avenue for like any reason. So like if you could not have to do that, like why subject yourself?
And it's interesting too, because I'd like to find out like if that's what actually was the rationale behind it, because it does suggest then that the kind of the other side of the argument with this chicken or the egg, what comes first, the no cars and then the development, etc., that people are still going to be car dependent. And in that case, it literally was dependent even to get to the station. And I don't know if that meant, because there's a hurricane or because the tractor trailers are going to be whizzing by soon or what, but it is something that we should explore further. And I think too, the other thing is that I think my understanding is that the commuter lot on the other side of the highway bridge has always been underutilized. And that surprised me as well for underutilization, to be able to hop over to catch a train from there, because that's, that's also very close to the station in terms of being walkable. So someone coming in from even the other end of East Avenue beyond the Norwalk Green would be able to park there and then just, walk over. But okay. Anybody else's hand raised or? Any other new topics that anyone needs to bring up? No one has asked about the, I guess I'll bring it up. So one of the big questions is And I'm not quite sure who's on this call, so we don't force people to register, and we don't restrict anyone from attending our meetings, but I do know that in the past we've had at least one planning and zoning commissioner who attends our meetings. And I also see, it looks like maybe some of the engineers as well, but I would say that, at least to put publicly, that if this application gets approved, and that we still have the ability to appeal that decision. And so I just wanted to make sure that the public is aware of that, and whether we have the kind of the stamina or the desire or the finances or the time to be able to do that is another story. But I do want to say that all of the statutory time clocks that are established by the state really tend to work against residents for the most part. Not just in land use, but a whole bunch as I've learned more about government. And so it's a very short time clock from the time this approval actually gets legally noticed in the newspaper. And we've noticed a new trend also with staff, that they have these resolutions and approvals ready to go into the newspaper basically the next day. So I'm not quite sure how that works. It tends, we tend to think then that the thing was already baked before the vote was taken. But from the time it appears in the newspaper to the time that we can file the appeal is a very short window. And so if it does come to that, things will progress, very quickly, and decisions have to be made, and just to keep people in the loop. The other point to make with that, and we've made it, I think, ad nauseum now to the commission, is that one of the reasons we're so concerned with the Cemetery Street development is that if it gets approved the way that it is, it really will become the basis for the analysis of every future special permit in the zone. And it would leave the Planning and Zoning Commission with very little or none in the way of a legal right to deny a future application if it essentially met all the same standards and bonus points, etc. And that's what a primary concern is. And so people could say, well, we've only seen 2 so far, and Mr. Kleppen can tell you that it's unlikely the full build out of applications for 1,200 apartments would ever happen. The fact remains that going forward, there could be applications one after another if someone has control of the properties. And the ones we'd be concerned with are ones that would be similar to Cemetery Street. ENNA considers that having been spot zoned specifically for the parcel, and the zoning that allowed it to happen specified that it can be built that way because it is situated between 2 corners. And so if you look at the East Avenue corridor, you can just imagine yourself that there's a few other parcels that are fairly large that also are situated between 2 corners, or could be assembled to be situated between 2 corners. And if another parcel like that opens up or gets assembled, then an application could come in tomorrow for essentially the same thing we just saw.
Diane, Lisa Roger is asking, what is an intervener and what does that status mean?
So intervener under the law has a number of different meanings depending on the application. In our case, ENNA filed as an intervener so that if this goes to appeal, one of the things that we can ask to be reconsidered is the complete lack of a real environmental impact study that was done. And I can't cite the statutes, but under the Connecticut statutes with the Clean Air Act, it allows anyone in the state of Connecticut to file as a party to a public hearing or a proceeding, and on the grounds that a particular development or an activity is impacting the air or water quality in the community. And so anyone, it's interesting with intervener under the Clean Air Act, because you don't even have to live in the community that a proposed activity is in. You could live in another part of the state and say, I'm filing as an intervener, as a party to this, because I'm concerned with the air and water quality. And so ENNA chose to file as intervener status, just so we would have it, whether we need it or not. There'll also be some question, though, if it gets to that point, from the judge about whether or not we timely filed. I'm going to start talking like a lawyer now, may or not. But if you don't timely file, which we may have technically missed a deadline, we're not sure. The judge can still rule that it was valid and still allow us to file as interveners. And it allows us to get all the documentation. We're listed as part of everyone who's involved in an application or an activity, the same way all the lawyers are, the engineers, the city. We would be listed so that all the documents are made available to us. And as interveners, we also have the opportunity, it's more of becomes a legal proceeding, and we have the opportunity to present witnesses and experts and to cross-examine other parties to the matter. So I think I got that all right. And if Mayor Knopp would like to correct me there or add to that, or got it. Okay. Now, so the other thing, so that was one of the two things that we had to get done with the lawyer. The other thing is, though, if we do go to appeal, so people who appeal decisions basically have to be folks who are aggrieved by what the land use decision was. And so if you live 3 miles away from the Cemetery Street development, you really would be hard pressed to say that this is going to have some sort of a negative impact directly on your quality of life or your property value, et cetera. And that's why under appeal, the folks who are eligible and qualified most typically are abutters, immediate abutters to the property. And that's why we secured early on a number of people who are willing to put their name, who are abutters and are willing to put their name to a legal action, should that be necessary. Because even ENNA, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to file as a party to the appeal. It would have to be the abutters. And I think I have that right too, Mayor Knopp. Thank you. I am a closet lawyer wannabe.
Yeah, there's a very slight chance that the association might be able to get what's called associational standing because you have enough members who, but it's a long shot. The law isn't favorable toward bringing in associations because it's easy then to manufacture standing, as it were. I know that we had the Norwalk Public Library Foundation getting associational standing when we challenged the construction of the 50 apartments in the parking lot behind the library that Jason Milligan wanted to build.
Right.
But that never got actually resolved. He filed a motion against us, but we settled the case with him to block him before that ever got finally decided. So it's a long shot. And you're basically right. You have to be an abutting landowner, and then you have automatic standing. So it's right. If you've got that, there's no reason to take the risk with associational standing.
Thank you. The documents that we posted as well on the DOT letter that came back, we did write to the DOT today, to that official, to ask them to clarify exactly what it was that they were looking to get back from the applicant, and also to determine for them to tell us exactly what the process is for the DOT to do their final review of the street change. And so we hope to hear back from them as well. And then there was some conflicting information. And these things go back and forth, so it's not adversarial, but the engineering firm that we hired to do that cursory review of the traffic studies had pointed out a number of concerns and deficiencies. And one of them did have to do with fire safety. So we're going to get some clarification on that, because what they were concerned with, apparently Steve Kleppen went back to Fire Marshal. His name is escaping me now. Another senior moment here, Broderick, to get clarification on the safety of the facility in terms of access of apparatus to the property. And right now we have a couple of differing opinions about whether or not the fire department needs access to the rear of the building. And so we're going to try to work on getting that clarified. But also we noticed in the response that came from the applicants to the DEEP, I think it was to their letter, they had indicated that emergency apparatus would have access from East Avenue. And I have no idea where that would be, because the access from East Avenue is beyond the building, beyond Sweet Ashley's. And it's where you would have that little, what they're calling the public amenity seating there. And I don't see any way that there could be emergency vehicles that could get in there. The other point that the experts raised was for us was the turning radius. There wasn't an analysis that they found in the applicant's experts documents about turning radius behind the property. So if a fire truck did need to get back there, we weren't sure, if they had to do like a 20-point turn to be able to even be able to operate anything. So we're getting some more clarification on that too. You'll see some of those documents posted, and as they get posted, we'll continue to raise questions. What ends up happening on the planning and zoning website is that they have pages now, which thankfully this is something that Steve Kleppen did implement when he came on at the request of the Coalition of Neighborhood Associations, where they post all of the land use applications on the city website. But what ends up happening, especially with one as big as Cemetery Street, the application literally has dozens of documents that get posted, and they're supposed to be dated as they get posted and onto the website. But they don't have any means of notifying the public when a new document gets posted. And so this may sound absolutely ridiculous, but this is what we have to do as the public. And when I say we, I mean me, usually. I literally multiple times a day, I have to go onto the zoning website, and I have to look to see if another document has been added. And they don't always actually even add the newest document at the end of the listing. And so you have to go through each section or each segment of the type of document and search for something new that may have been added that you didn't know about. And essentially you have to do that every day, because postings can go on every day. On occasion, Steve Kleppen will give us a heads up that they're about to post something, but that doesn't always happen. And it's very burdensome on ENNA and on the public to have to go in and do that. And so that's something that really should be changed within the city system. So there's some sort of a trigger that would alert someone. If you opted in to follow an application, then anything that gets posted should trigger an email to you to say a new document has been posted, and then you can go and take a look at it. The reason why I bring that up is what Judy was talking about earlier with this whole zoning regulations rewrite that's happening. One of the things that ENNA has been lobbying for years, and also the Coalition of Norwalk Neighborhood Associations, is to have the city really have a meaningful, robust public notification system in place for when land use applications and zoning amendments and zoning changes are applied for. right now the city basically relies on size 4 font legal notices in the back of the Norwalk Hour. That is the primary means of communication for notification to the public of zoning applications. And we really think that that needs to change. ENNA did the draft document a number of years ago for CNNA that was submitted to the city with kind of best practices for public notification. And the city decided not to embrace that and pursue it. It's ironic that the zoning chairman at the time who rejected it was actually Adam Blank, the attorney who's before us now with the Cemetery Street application. Just kind of a fun fact there. But the way that we presented it is that there would be a series of increasingly more noticeable notifications to the public based on whatever the application was. So, for example, if you had an application just to convert, say, a one-family house to a two-family house in the zone, it may just be a prominent notice on the city website in addition to the notification to the abutting neighbors. But say you were putting up one Cemetery Street, something like that would require notification that would have large placards on all three sides. That would be, weather resistant, visible from the road. It would lead you to believe that there's a large application, a special permit, how many units, that there will be public hearings, and it would also direct you to the city address where you could get more information. So, and in some communities, large applications even require that the community post things on the public television that's made available through the cable stations as well. So it runs a whole gamut of the type of notifications that would be required. And ENNA really strongly believes that the public has no chance to be engaged if they really are not informed as to what's going on with land use. So when we take a look at the rewrite, we're hoping that much, if not all, of what we originally requested is at least being considered. And if it's not, we will go back and ask for that as well. Okay, anyone else?
No other hands
Marianne?
raised. There's only one additional comment. If there's a different chair now, should it be resubmitted? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, actually, so you're talking about the public notification, right?
Yeah,
So
I think so.
right, it happened to be that was a zoning task force that the mayor had put together, and leading up the task force way back then was Adam Blank when he was a zoning chair. So this would actually be submitted now through Steve Kleppin's group because they're the ones who were charged with rewriting the regulations as a whole. So that commission and that committee, that working committee that existed back then doesn't exist today. Yep. So our next meeting is April 17th. And but in between, of course, we'll be sending emails and keeping everyone in the loop on Cemetery and on Van Zant, anything else new that comes up. And to expect that we're definitely going to have one guest at our April 17th meeting. The folks I told you with the Veterans Memorial Park Shoreline Project will present to us, and then possibly the 49 Van Zant. And we may as well take a quick poll here on the, and I think we can actually, just having seen the drawing of 49 Van Zant and the number of units, can folks just raise your hand if you have an interest in actually having a presentation of that development plan made to ENNA next month? Okay. I see a few going up here. And a lot of people are off camera, but I see some hands going up. So, yep. Okay. All right. I see enough hands going up. So we'll go ahead. I'll reach out to Attorney Suchi and check her availability to have her come in and walk us through that. And it would be a great opportunity for her, because I know she would be open to feedback on the front end that help to reduce some of the angst and contentiousness that can happen on the back end. So we'll see how it goes with this one. All right, everyone. It is after 8 o'clock. So if there's nothing else, thank you, everyone. If you had questions or comments or suggestions and didn't want to raise your hand or speak, you can email into East Norwalk Neighborhood Association at info@eastnorwalk.org, and we will get back to you right away. And we hope to see some of you at the public hearing on Wednesday night, either in person or in Zoom. And we'll do a follow-up and a recap of that as soon as we can via email. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Diane.